Thanks. Can y'all hear me out there? Meg?
Yeah.
She's usually my barometer for... It's not my first time in here trying to... I've strategized quite a bit about how to convince people that I am, in fact, related to the older Faulkner, I guess you could say. I thought of saying like he's my great uncle or something like that, and it's never really worked. Except a couple weeks ago, I think I convinced one of my best friends, who should know better, that I'm related to him, and I think he bought it. So, and of course I didn't divest him of that notion either. But thanks for coming out, and thanks a lot to Lisa for just inviting me out here. It's great to be here and everything. So I'm sort of method writing this novel about coal mining in eastern Kentucky. And so when I got the word deep, I was like, yeah, all right, this is perfect, this is gonna be easy. And so I started writing a chapter of this novel, and I'm gonna read sort of a small portion of that tonight. And this sort of wonderful alchemy occurred where I was trying to write towards this concept of deep, and I was like, this has to be deep. This has to be, somehow address the issue of deep, and it got me thinking a lot about what it means not just to explore the sort of claustrophobic spaces of Appalachia, the subterranean spaces, all those sort of nooks and crannies that exist in between the mountains, but also how that informs my exploration of these characters, and I'm not sure if I could really explain a whole lot about it, but it was a nice process, and I really am glad that constraint sort of helped me reach that, I guess. But so this is sort of a sort of experiment, sort of inspired by this novel project, and this protagonist, or there's several protagonists, but this one in particular is on the run. He has just sort of run off and murdered a union buster. He's a coal miner, and this is Depression era, and so he has murdered a union buster and is sort of on the run right now, and is kind of sort of lost in the woods and sort of thinking about or what this means and where his life is at and everything like that. So. So without further ado, the first death he witnessed following that of his parents was an older miner, perhaps not even a month into his first job at Portal 22, or maybe 27. He had forgotten now, so tenebrous was his memory of that time, like the silver nitrate of a tintype smudged with the intense heat of a flame. It wasn't a Bayless mine then either. Bayless is the name of the coal operator, but a small operation that had since been swallowed up in the intervening years. This was toward the end of staying with Opaline when things started to sour between them, and he had begun to enclose himself in thought. Underneath the earth and above it too, the work both broke and rebuilt him. And in time he saw that it was adding stiff columns of muscle to his arms and shoulders. He felt dizzyingly capable, more in control when he swung slide-top powder boxes up into the cart and set them into place. Put the blasting caps well away under the plank seat in front, and when he had led the blinder ponies by the halter along the dark, scrabbled path underground, they would balk, tug back against the reins hopefully, and in his grip he would keep a steady pressure, lay a gentle hand along their manes, whisper to them in echoes by the half-light of a lard oil lamp. They followed. He had a circuit given to him by Horton Baker, the shift boss, whose name he somehow remembered all these years later. His route was changed periodically, but by usual routine would trace down from the main adit, sloping straight back into 4 Mile Mountain, treading alone between the stopes and capillaries where the miners worked, sometimes alone, sometimes with activity all about him. There were languages he would never understand, but knew them by sound: Wop, Chinaman, Balkan. And from the few black and Welsh miners, loud exhortations he could barely comprehend. English that wasn't English. They regarded him with a warm bemusement, not friendliness, but with a degree of guardianship, and he sensed Even at their most insouciant, they were on the lookout for anything that might befall him. It was a black miner, a true black and not just coal-smeared, who cuffed him behind the head in his first week and, without speaking, moved the candle away from the powder box, both of which Errol had arranged unthinkingly close to one another. The man looked at him, nodded, and sloped away. It was things of that sort, accruing each day they all clocked in and clocked out alive. Errol felt the small accruals of confidence and luck moving his way with time, like abacus beads. His interactions with the miners went from instructive to familiar, more amenable to a quick greeting and a knowing nod. In his head, he tracked the progress of his relationship with him, taking account of what seemed increments of friendship and the regressions, too, if there ever was an incident that was less than amicable. The first person he saw die was one of these men, and as unexotic to him as they came. He was a Virginia man whom the others called Sprague, and only that, or at least Errol had never heard, or Sprague, and only that, or at least Errol had never heard any other name for him. Sprague had a sallow, shapeless face, like he routinely was up all night drinking, but was known to be among the most fastidious and quiet of the crew at the portal. Errol never recalled seeing it, but Sprague was said to be the sort of man who eats the contents of his tin lunch pail, one at a time by type: corn fritters, tinned cherries, his apple, and spoonfuls of quince jelly one by one, and flatly, religiously refused to say a word except between courses, no exceptions. To Errol himself, Sprague afforded a not unpleasant but almost indifferent manner, like he was meeting Errol for the first time, every time, and was struck amnesiac in between. Though the front of it dirtied in a long black stripe by clock out, he wore a pressed white shirt each day under his jacket. Beyond that, Errol hadn't enough time to get to know Sprague. Somewhere within that first month, he was told to follow the miner to an early and reliable stope that led to a room thought to be well dug out. Baker was about to order the pillars pulled from that area and asked Sprague to get down and check the seam once more with Errol and the mule team in tow to haul out the results. They found each other at sunup outside the portal, Errol having arrived first and doodling on the charge boxes with a shale pencil while he waited. "Well, feller, how about it?" Sprague said, walking up. "Keep me company today?" Yes, sir," said Errol. He hopped down from the wagon. In doing so, he caught one of the dynamite boxes with his foot, and it fell to the dirt. The box, one of those tongue-and-groove affairs, sprang open in a tiny explosion that left all its constituent panels intact, the wooden teeth jutting out. The pieces looked like bear paws. Paper, tinsel, and dynamite sticks everywhere, Sprague chuckled. "Easy does it, boy," he said. "Don't you go doing that underground, the boss will run you out ragged, you hear? Dynamite ain't to be trifled with." "Yes, sir," said Errol. He was scrambling to pick up the thin, wax-sealed cylinders of charge, cradling them in his arms as he went. "Right, I'm going down to get started. You follow me down and listen for the sound of my pick. We'll be the first ones in there today." That was the last thing he said to Errol, and probably to anyone. He walked several paces from the cart, lit and trimmed his lamp, and walked through the portal. Just strode right in. He was well inside by the time Errol got the scattered dynamites sorted out and moved the team in. The light of the flame shifted and glimmered against the side wall. It was so early that the air inside for once was warmer than out, and Errol unlooped the clasps on his Mackinaw jacket. They really were the first of the faces that morning, and it felt strange occupying the wide road of the main tunnel without bustle or the chaos of men working and calling down. Thinking about it was what made him notice the silence. Sprague, built solid and always to be counted on for a hearty swing of the hammer, made not a sound. The ponies felt something amiss and grunted, and Errol could tell their legs were shaking. He urged them forward in a soft voice, weighing how much calling out to Sprague would spook them. He decided against it. It was his complex fortune what came next, both inexorable and ruinous. He guessed the surviving embers of Sprague's lamp had ignited a small puff of bug dust that had drifted over them, Not a dangerous amount, but enough to strobe the room like a magnesium flashbulb he had seen a photo man use once. The ponies bucked and jerked but held, and the sudden brilliance of light led them straight to Sprague. Errol held up his lamp. The older man was on his back, legs and arms flung out halfway, as if lying down cheerily in a stack of hay. But his head was gone, disappeared under a small, vicious cairn of black rock. Errol jumped down and whimpered. He shone his lamp and saw a flume of bright, arterial blood. It was a kettle-bottom fall, cylinders of ore that slid down from holes in the rock like curtain weights, like leopards on the hunt. One, maybe two, had descended on Sprague and ended him with a dispassion only the earth knows of, perhaps before he even lifted his pick. It still leaned against the rough, coal face. Errol crouched and took Sprague's hand, bending his rubbery thumb gently, then ungently, asking him over and again to rise, wake up, to lead them out into the daylight that now seemed to him as precious as draughts of good water. For a moment his own lamp spent its wick, and he sat in total blackness, Sprague's hand still warm in his, and he could neither clench the hand nor let it drop to the mine floor. He just sat there. After some length he groped around and found the lamp and relit it and stood up. Not much to recall hence, he emerged from the mine behind the ponies, who surged forth with relief, and told Baker he hadn't the strength to lift Sprague or even the rock fall that did him in. He couldn't for the life of him remember what the shift boss said when he first heard, only the cool way in which the man stood and collected the numbered brass tag hanging on the pegboard and squeezed it in his hand. It would be used to match with the one on Sprague's body. He sent Errol home for the day, told him to take the afternoon and to be back at the morning whistle. By now, more men had arrived, and they milled anxiously everywhere, and bells warbled from the tipple. Word had gotten out. Errol stepped from the field office into the gray morning and walked right out the main gate, looking back only once. When he did, he saw a team of 6 miners dragging something from the portal, some dead weight, though it well could have only been rock, cradled in canvas. Opaline was serving herself breakfast by the time he arrived home, coffee and hoe cakes that were skillet browned and still warm. He sat in a chair at the table and folded his hands and stared. He hadn't yet felt growing pains, and his toes barely swept the floor, even in shoes. Opaline placed a small tin cup of coffee before him and swizzled honey over 2 hoe cakes. "I heard yonder whistle just now," she said. "Do they give everyone the day off?" "Just me," said Errol. She stopped. "Why just you?" "Reckoned I'd need it," he said. "I was there." Then he paused for a time, and then he told her about Sprague. She thought for a long time about what he said and herself made no reply, only fed the coal stove and spot wiped it with a burnt rag. "You ain't hurt?" she said. "No, ma'am." "He have kin nearby, children?" "I don't reckon so, I don't know." "Well, you'll go ask the foreman tomorrow, and go visit the man's kin if he's got it." "Opaline, I do hope you ain't about to fuss at me over this. Over something you ought to be doing, anyhow. What will I even tell them?" "You'll tell them what you saw of Mr. Sprague's final moments. But I didn't see them, really. Then you'll narrate them as they would want to be heard, you hear?" She had begun sorting through her inventory of used books, old manuals of home medicine, and the novels of England, and a miscellany of others. She pawed through the pages with her rough hands and folded back dog ears and shook dust from out the spines. He took his first bite from the hoe cakes, tasted the cheese and honey. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The next day the shift boss pulled him off the wagon trips and had him in the tipple, shoveling the smaller bits of ore. He was asked to run cables and telegrams from office to office on his breaks. When he asked the shift boss about Sprague's kinfolk, the man only shrugged. "You can ask the other men on his shift," he said, "but I don't much know myself." That was more or less the end of it. Thanks.